Chapter 18. Tell her he is a monster, Glacian sputtered miserably amid the glowing apparatus that supported his life. She knows your opinion already, Rebek whispered through an edge of her robe. She glanced over her shoulder, where Deeft waited impatiently. The planeswalker did not deign to cover her lovely features, sour with irritation. She stood, hips cocked, arms crossed, and lips dubious. To be summoned by the blue gemstone amulet when there was no immediate crisis was galling enough. To be summoned by two folk who had snatched the amulet from its rightful owner, from Yawgmoth, that was almost beyond her ability to bear. The constant scuttling of goblins about her, poking and picking, only frayed her already tattered patience. Tell her he has killed the delegates, gabbled Glacian. He hasn't, Rebek hissed. He's keeping them hostage somewhere you're not helping. She turned stiffly toward the planeswalker and dropped the robe away. Forgive our whispers. Glacian wants to thank you for answering our summons. Deeft nodded shallowly. Tell her he has imprisoned the elders, he slurred. It is a time of crisis for our city-state and our empire. We are under threat of attack. Yawgmoth has used his control of the armies to take command of the empire. He has dissolved the council, has imprisoned the elders of the rebel city-states. If the rebel states attack, he might be forced to execute them. What does this have to do with me? Glacian mumbled. Tell her she must do away with Yawgmoth. Rebek shook her head violently. We want you to take the elders to safety. There are nearly 100 of them. Deeft's brow creased, and she tilted her head. You want me to do what? Turning entirely away from her husband, Rebek pleaded. I know your power. I've stepped through the blind eternities with you. I know you can simply appear in the internment cave and sweep those 100 elders up in your power and carry them somewhere where they will be safe. Incredulous, the planeswalker said. I thought you were Yawgmoth's friends. You want me to deliver the captured leaders of the rebellion back to their armies. Rebek frowned in consternation. No. Take them to another world. Take them to one of your paradise planes, a place where they can live safely until the danger is past. They would be miserable. Not a one of them could build a lean-to, could start a fire. It would be placing babies in a wolf den. Goblins, interposed Glacian. Tell her to take some of my goblins from the monorig. They could be servants. They could build shelters and snare Connies. Yawgmoth will only kill them eventually anyway. Rebek blinked amazedly at her husband. Glacian asks that you also take goblins to this paradise world, his goblins, who could serve the elders. Deeft hung her head and laughed. You want me to carry 100 elders and 100 goblins to a paradise somewhere? Eyes pleading, Rebek said. You could do it with a mere thought. It is a small boon to grant the genius of Halcyon, the very man who first drew you here. Her eyes grew hard, and her voice dropped to a whisper. Yawgmoth is my ruler, my friend, perhaps more. This is no betrayal, only an act of mercy, only the simple request of an infirm genius, who may himself be dying but wants others to live. The irate edge was gone from Deeft's gaze. Pushing past Rebek, she approached the wheelchair where Glacian sat. One slender hand descended to touch him, to spread flat across his phthisis-ravaged chest. Yes. I will do this for you, Glacian. I had forgotten who you were, who you are. It is a small favor, and I will do it for you. Then, without moving a muscle, she was gone from the room. Goblins recoiled from the space where she had been. Rebek moved toward the wheelchair, reflexively drawing up the robe to cover her mouth and nose. You've done a good thing today, husband. You've saved many lives. He turned his face away from her, as though her words had been a slap. What is it? That damned cloak over your mouth. Deeft did not cover her mouth. She touched me. She's a planeswalker, Rebek said. And you're immune. He still did not look at her. What if I'm not? Daily you touch the temple power stones. You could catch the disease from them as easily as from me. Slowly lowering the edge of the cloak, Rebecca approached the chair. You think I am repulsive? A look of dread flashed across her face. No. I find the disease repulsive. I am the disease. That's all I am anymore. Rebecca reached her bare hand out just as Deft had. She set it, trembling, on the scabrous skin of Glacian's chest. Closing her eyes and swallowing, she left her hand there. Only then would he turn to look at her. You're in love with him. He's fooled even you. You're only waiting for me to die so that you can be with him. No, Rebecca said, withdrawing her hand. She stared, revulsion and love warring in her. With a swift motion, she bent and wrapped him in a strong embrace. No, husband. We are soulmates. It's just the illness, and the war, and the upheaval. No. He hasn't fooled me. He will cure you. That's why I believe in him. Because he will cure you. He will cure all of us. And you and I will dance together in the THRAN temple when this bloody business is done. What's this? Came an imperious shout at the door. Yawgmoth strode across the floor toward Glacian and Rebecca. She did not let go of her husband. She clung to him as though knowing this would be their final embrace. Yawgmoth wrapped a powerful arm around her and yanked back. He couldn't budge her. He growled and pulled harder. His free hand peeled her fingers away from Glacian's back. Torn skin bled through the gown he wore. Let go. You're infecting yourself. You're killing yourself. Yawgmoth shouted. No. Leave me alone. He tore her other hand loose, and black pus oozed beneath her fingernails. Look what you've done to yourself. Glacian writhed, groaning in despair and agony. Look what you've done to your husband. Let go of me. Rebecca shouted, thrashing against his grip. Yawgmoth ignored her struggles. He dragged her from Glacian's room even as her husband shouted slurred epithets behind them. Though his arms were steel bands, Yawgmoth's voice was silken. It's all been too much. I know. You've been brave these many years. You've watched as every method has failed to heal him. You love him still, even ravaged as he is. Let me go. But think of Glacian. He doesn't want to jeopardize you. He doesn't want you to suffer as he is suffering. Yawgmoth violently kicked back the door to his laboratory and dragged Rebecca within. He hauled her past tables and implement racks to a cabinet where the serums were stocked. He flung back the doors of the cabinet, fetched up a bottle of alcohol, and pulled the cork with his teeth. Glacian doesn't want anything to happen to you, and neither do I. He poured the stinging stuff liberally over her hands, arms, and chest. This will kill any of the contagion that might have gotten onto you. Damn you. Damn you, Yawgmoth. SHHH, 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 he urged. She was drenched, from fingertip to fingertip. Yawgmoth snatched up a jar of serum and a jar of something else. One-handed, he drew the mixtures into a needle bladder, wrestled his unhappy captive around to face him, and injected the solution into her arm. She clawed his chest for a moment before slumping into his arms. SHHH, SHHH, SHHH. That will help your body fight off any infection that might have gotten into you blood. It's all right. You'll be safe now. You won't get sick. I won't let you get sick. Voice raw from screaming, Rebecca said, why don't you cure him? Why doesn't your serum work for my husband? In a desolate tone, Yawgmoth said, I don't know. I honestly do not know. From the beginning, his case has been different. You've made it different. You don't want him to recover. Oh, I do, Rebecca, Yawgmoth soothed. I do. I need him to be well. I need him to be able to fight me for your hand. I will not steal the wife of an invalid. Rebek pushed away from him and stared bleakly into his eyes. Don't do this. Don't toy with me. I've been through too much. I know. You've been through too much. You've kept a vigil for 7 years. I thought I was doing you a kindness to let him remain here, but he is always just out of reach. That is no kindness. The health corps will see to him now. They will take him to the quarantine caves. They have new, aggressive treatments far better than these goblins and contraptions. They will care for him. They will heal him. I promise you that, Rebek. And I have never broken my promises. You will heal him. A fragile light lit her eyes. Tell me you will heal him. I will heal him, Rebek. I promise. The elders were none too happy. They had been carried into paradise, but it was not their paradise. Salvation is a relative thing. One would have thought that anywhere would have been better than where they had been entombed alive in a dark cavern for 3 weeks. A trickling spring that ran along its base provided water for drinking, washing, and waste removal such as it was. Clumps of faintly glowing mushrooms and the blind cave crickets that sometimes appeared silhouetted on the mushrooms were the main source of sustenance. Worse than all that was the knowledge that Yawgmoth had sealed them in there. The weight of his disapproval was as vast and inescapable as the mile of rock between them and the air of the upper world. Compared to that place, this green and verdant land should have been paradise. Tall forests, broad plains, lush rivers, the land was bountiful and virgin. It was a whole world for them to explore, a pleasant place to wait out the war. Paradise, except for one fact, wilderness. The most important figures in the Thran Empire were reduced to squalid pioneers. They huddled together in filthy robes, worn to tatters in the last weeks. They were worse dressed, thinner, and more craven than the monorig goblins that circulated among them. Could have conveyed us to anywhere on Dominaria, railed eldest Jamoth, but you choose to bring us here. I could have left you to rot in that cave, Deft pointed out flatly. And this is only temporary, only until the war is done and there is no more threat to you and you are no more threat to the Empire. We demand that you return us to our nation, the eldest said. You demand nothing, snapped Deft. For the time being, this is your nation. You can't tell from here, but we're on top of an inverted mountain. Just like your extrusion. It'll keep you safe from the natives and they from you. These goblins will help you. Treat them well. They will have a much better sense than you of which plants are poisonous and which carnivores are dangerous. They will build shelters for you, gather food, serve as your personal servants, and all of it because Glacian asked them to. Make yourselves at home. I will fetch you when the war is done. She turned from them, preparing to depart. Wait, eldest Jamoth called out. At least tell us the name of this place. Call it what you want, the planeswalker said simply. Just before winking from existence, she added, the natives of this world call it Mercadia. It had been a hellish descent. The rioters had destroyed Dungus's elevator. Glacian descended the old-fashioned way borne down the switchback path by a passel of goblins. Before and behind his pallet, health corps workers marched with swords and lanterns. Twice the bellows ceased their work, and the crew lowered Glacian to the path to effect repair. Each time, he fell unconscious before the mechanism could be repaired. Each time he awoke to tepid lantern light on jagged cave stone overhead. At last, the descent was done. The path leveled and widened. Cold cave air gave over to the warm, stale scent of human breath in confined spaces. Led by the health corps, the goblins proceeded down a winding passage, past a series of side caves, and to the quarantine cave at their base. They shuffled beneath the archway and into a broad cavern. Glacian had expected the stench of rotting flesh. What he smelled was somehow worse, the harsh stink of cleansers. The quarantine cave had been transformed since Yawgmoth's ascendance. Lanterns glowed throughout the vast chamber, its walls and floor scrubbed and polished until all filth was removed. The old shelves had been torn down, replaced by orderly stacks of whitewashed cells. They seemed almost white coffins, in which the ill could reside in complete isolation from power stone radiation and cross-contamination. Each sarcophagus had a number, each a set of charts. White-garbed and masked health corps workers moved on catwalks among the racks of coffins. Previously, the patients had been plague victims in quarantine. Now they were test subjects. The cleanness, the privacy, the attentive healers, these changes were not meant to assure comfort or decency or healing. They were meant to assure reliable results. The goblins carried the pallet to the center of the complex. A white-suited man waited with a new set of charts. "Hello, Glacian. Welcome to the quarantine caves of Halcyon. I received your write-up this morning. I've prepared an especially large healing capsule to accommodate your apparatuses." Lolling weakly on the pallet, Glacian barely managed to bring his head around and see the man who spoke to him. "Not you," he gabbled. "Not Jix.